part of the training also helps to highlight two things. One is that we're typically not very good at predicting the influence of the context on our decisions and our behaviors and our emotions. We take it for granted that the social context or the environmental influences impacts how we actually feel and think. Some of the classic studies on the bystander effect are a really good example of this. So you take a group of participants or individuals, you put them in a room much like this one, and you have a few people in the room. And while they're waiting for presumably the study to start, the researcher will start pumping smoke into this room. And what's funny is that the participant who's sitting here usually will not do anything if they perceive no one else is doing anything. And even though they're starting to cough, even though the room is filling up with smoke, they won't even voice the recognition that this room is filled with smoke, because when they look around, when they see these other people who are Confederates, there's basically hired actors to sit there and not do anything, the individual will override their own reactions, their own beliefs, and instead will rely on the information and the context. So we're traditionally not very good at recognizing the influence of the context on our own outcomes. And the other is that we're also just not very good at being able to predict how we will feel in the future or in different contexts. Part of the basis for that bias is that we're also not very good at understanding time. So I love time because it's one of those concepts that's entirely theoretical. Like if I were to ask you what time it is, your watch and my watch will usually tell the same time, but it's completely an artifact of what we've constructed. We have agreed through cultural norms that there are 12 hours in a day and so on and so forth. And we also think that time is something that we all sort of see and interact with in the same way, but it's not true. And because it's an entirely mental construct, it's prone to bias. And we're not good at picking up our own biases. And the bias with time is that we have this tendency of seeing the past and the future in different ways. So if I were to ask you 10 years ago, what were your preferences and what kinds of food did you like and who did you hang out with, chances are you would recognize that who you are today has shifted and evolved dramatically from who you were 10, 15, 20 years ago. And yet when we ask people to project themselves into the future, they somehow take the image of themselves and they paste it at every transition in their lives as though they will continue to have the same preferences, the same look, the same feelings and reactions to all of the events that will happen to them. And why that's potentially harmful for students is if they get a bad grade, for instance, the emotion that comes on for that bad grade gets accentuated because now they think this feeling will last forever because of this bias of time. So there's a lot of sort of factors and these elements that we target that help to overcome these two dimensions. One is the impact of the context, and one is these sort of biases that we're blind to that often impact our decisions and our performance.